On page 25 of the latest ProSci research, there's an item that says culture is one of the biggest barriers to digital effectiveness. And there's a great quote: "A culture rife with poor attitudes and internal politics encouraged individual priorities, disruptive thinking and resistance to change." And it's absolutely right. When we think about why that might be the case, I can refer to the videos that I posted the other day from Forbes, which said 65% of employees would give up a pay rise if it saw their leader fired, from Gallup, which said 82% of people find their leaders uninspiring, from the Harvard Business Review, which said, in our opinion, these two are directly related. And it reminded me of the findings from Gartner and McKinsey, which said culture is the biggest barrier to digital effectiveness, not technology, but culture. So what is culture? Well, culture is the social heritage of a group. It decides what is acceptable or not. It decides what is important or not. It decides what is right or wrong and what is workable or not. And there's a great quote I saw somewhere which said, "Culture eats technology for breakfast, lunch and dinner." And if we break it down further and compare the analog culture to the digital culture, there's a few items to think about. Analog culture, defensive. Digital culture, attack. Analog, customers are distant. Digital, customers are centric. Analog, data measures past performance. Digital culture, data is used to drive live insights and decision making. Analog culture, reporting. Digital culture, real time. Analog culture, detailed business case required for major projects. Digital culture, lean project canvas. Analog culture, risk averse. Digital culture, fail fast. Focus group insights on analog culture, frequent user testing and digital culture. Market research for analog culture, listening and learning for digital culture. So there's a whole bunch of comparisons, and ultimately if we're talking about technology, then it's a digital culture that we're after. But to achieve that culture, how do we do it? Well, it all starts with leadership. Leaders are key. Now, we already said from the ProSci research and from experience that the number one success factor for any change, including a culture change, is active and visible executive sponsorship. And there's a great insight on page 26 of the latest ProSci research which helps us with that. It suggests that we should start equipping sponsors in their role as leaders of change before the planning phase of a major change programme. Now, we see in the real world that often this happens after the planning phase, if at all. So that's a crucial insight. We've got to try to engage executive sponsors and leaders of organisation before the planning change of a project. And it talks to this idea that I mentioned earlier. If you're the sponsor of a programme, you make a faithful promise from the original Latin that this programme will yield a return of investment, will yield a business benefit. So that research on page 26 suggests that we should engage leaders before the planning phase, when the project is being considered, to make sure that they have the tools and skills to lead that change, which may involve culture change as well. Ultimately, if end users, who are the individual units of change, who must make personal decisions to embrace, adopt and use a new change, a new way of working, a new culture, if those end users decide it's not how we do things, it's the wrong way of doing things, then that's an example of how culture will thwart the best laid plans for any change in the organisation. What's my lesson from this? Well, my lesson is, if you want to land a significant change, pay attention to culture, start with the leaders, give them the tools that they need to drive that change. Hope you enjoyed.